Good morning. It is a great joy to be with you today. I'm going to kind of go through the presentation, and what I want to highlight at first, at least, is that this is in some ways a second round of the presentations we've been doing about endowments. I've asked Joanna to put into the chat the website link, as well as information about how you can get connected to the first version. It goes into a lot more depth about how to get started for a church in your endowment program, or particularly maybe it's how to renovate and start again an endowment program for a church or an agency, a connection organization. I want to talk about a few things that kind of highlight of that first version, and then I want to walk through kind of how to further grow it. So with the assumption that you've got some of that base work done, how to make next steps to grow it, to make a difference in the life of the church. Again, it's simply based on this conviction that God has entrusted us as people with resources, and that we're called to use them well and wisely, and to know that we are stewards of the resources in our lives, and how we can be good caretakers of those resources, how we can use them to make a difference for our family in life and in our estate planning, but also how we can use a portion of those to further the work of the church, to grow the kingdom, to be in ministry around us. We hear these passages from 2 Corinthians. Paul says, and God is able to provide you with every blessing in abundance, so that by always having enough of everything, you may share abundantly in every good work. And then from 1 Corinthians, Paul is speaking, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it to grow. We're called to think about how we can use the resources in our lives and in our congregation, and how we can make a difference. We have other trainings we have done about annual gifts and budgeting and those pieces. This is really about how to leave an enduring legacy gift with the resources that individuals have as part of our congregation. As we think big picture, really high level big picture, I think we need a few different things. We really need three things. We need a vision. The church needs to have vision, be doing good and healthy ministry that's making a lasting difference in the life of the church. And this is really because people want to give in ways that change lives and change the world. And so if we're doing good and faithful ministry, and we have expectations about how God will continue to use us to make a difference in our communities, to raise up disciples of Jesus Christ, to help them grow in their faith, to help them discover call and be a witness in the world around us, help us to do and be the church. That's key. If we have those pieces in place, then we can build upon it. The second thing is really to have a plan in place, to have a transparent, clear, trustworthy process that is very that people can understand about how the gifts, if I were to give you a gift in my estate, how you'll care for it and how it will be used and stewarded, and that you'll hold to my hopes and my vision, and that you'll be able to use it well and wisely to make a difference in the life of the church. I think this happens by having a charter in place and other pieces as part of a trustworthy process. The third thing we need is we need to make an ask. A lot of times people would consider a gift, but they have not been asked. Over and over again, we find that individuals we wonder, why have they not considered giving a gift to the church? And the most common response is, no one asked me. And so figuring out how we can put an ask as part of our regular process in this program of growing our endowments is a key piece. And then lastly, I just want you to understand it's not a short-term exercise. Sometimes we think about a capital campaign. We've got a pretty short window. It's not super short, maybe 3 years or something like that. Or we have the annual stewardship process and budgeting process and annual engagement. Those are shorter windows. This is a long-term process, and reminding ourselves to, stay at it. You put something in place and you keep engaging it, because we never know when the right time is for a family that they'll be reconsidering their estate plan and put something in place to make a difference. It's all about how do we make disciples? How do we change lives? How do we transform the world around us to be the body of Christ in the world and use the resources that individuals have been entrusted, have grown, so that we can make a difference. I want to highlight that there's great opportunity for us to make a lasting difference. The Kansas Health Foundation, in cooperation with Wichita State University, did some research about the transfer of wealth in Kansas and have found that forecasted roughly $350 billion will transfer from one generation to the next in Kansas in the next 20 years. It's actually from 2021 through 2040. And when I did the calculations of these numbers, Methodists in Kansas made up roughly 4% of the state population. And so if we are 4%, and if that stayed the same, and if we have a fair share of the resources, and if we gave a tithe, it would produce a shared pool of resources of $1.5 billion. Now that's thinking about the whole state. Actually, there's information about each of our counties, and I'm saying all those things just to help us understand that there's more resources in our communities than what we sometimes think, and to think about how we can be a good option for our faithful people to consider giving. The thing I usually invite them to do is to give a tithe. Maybe for some families, it's more than a tithe, might be a child's worth, or we have some families that give greater levels. But thinking about what kind of resources that we can receive and how we'll care for those, and to know the difference that we can make. So I want to highlight a few things. I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker about kind of some initial steps. And if you go to the earlier webinar that we did about this, you'll get a little bit more depth. But I think you need a charter. So if the Book of Discipline for United Methodist Churches says that the Board of Trustees is the group of people who are responsible for estate gifts. Some of the churches have chosen to create a new group of people that focus more intently on endowment programs, a permanent endowment committee, planned giving committee. Irregardless, thinking about, are there some shared policies? There's some basic ones that you might get in place. If we work with you, we try to work on a more fuller version with a charter, having clarity about the different funds that are receiving and how we'll steward them, how we'll distribute them. And we have templates for that we can help you with. And we'd be happy to work with you to help grow that. But I think having some set of policies that will govern the behaviors of the church and give clarity of how do you handle resources. Sometimes we have congregations call us and say, a gift has been given to us, and we don't know what to do. And putting a charter in place, even if we don't have a gift, is often a good step to put in place a process to be able to receive that. The second one is to have some mechanism to tell the story. Maybe it's a flyer, maybe it's a bulletin insert, maybe it's some other kind of mechanism that we can easily hand it to people to help them understand story and their options about how to give a gift if they were to remember that in their estate plan. Some other things I think are important are to have trainings. How do I put into place my estate plan? Maybe there are ways of gifting to the congregation, some basic things about what is a will or what is a trust, or how do I deal with my different resources? When I served as a local pastor, we intentionally tried to have trainings twice a year. Maybe you have it once a year. That would be a fine place to start. But having some place where we give training to individuals, what I find is that many folk don't have something in place. And having something coming from the church to invite them to take a next step will be an important piece. I think the research says more than 60% of the population in the United States do not have a will or trust. And if our congregations are representative of that, there's a good number of people that don't have a plan. And so their plan will be what the state's plan is for them, whether they like it or not. And if they knew the details of that, they may say that's not the best option. So I think having trainings in place about wills or taxes or basic financial investments and how to use your resources to make a difference in your giving is important. As a pastor, I tried to be intentional about engaging money throughout the course of the year. Maybe it's quarterly, or maybe, some churches, what I would often do is I would have a series of sermons, maybe 2, maybe 1, maybe 3, about stewardship in the fall time when we were doing our annual stewardship campaign. I also found myself talking about money during Advent, as people were getting ready for Christmas and thinking about gifts and thinking about how we relate to our resources. Or maybe it's during Lent or other times. I think having one of those sermons be about legacy giving would be a wonderful practice. And to do this, you have to be thinking farther ahead as a congregation and as the pastor and leadership team of the church. Number 5 is really to make expressions of thanks. So if you have kids go on a mission trip, or you're sending kids to bless them to go to church camp, and some of the money comes that's supporting this from endowments, tell that story. Or maybe a new gift comes and we can talk about the impact and the generosity of the donor and how it can make a difference. Having things before the congregation on a reoccurring basis, kind of a steady engagement, I think is important. Here are some other examples. A personal testimony. My last church, I had one of the persons from our endowment committee, who put into their estate plan to give a tithe to the church, told a personal story about why this was important to them and how it was moved them, how the church was so important that they wanted to make a gift in this way. And having those individuals do that. Some of them don't want to share that, but when you can have that occasion, I think that's wonderful. As I said, telling about new gifts or telling about monies that are deployed. Tyler and I were from our foundation staff, and I were at a church this last weekend, and we used one of the technology pieces that came from the endowment. And so a person from that church story that this was made possible by the endowment that came from the ministries of people of bequest. And so we got to see impact and how it made a difference for the worship and the presentation that we were making. I think just talking about the things on a steady process throughout the course of the year is important. One of the other practices I started doing in my last church was to put something into the mail. And I primarily were engaging the families who were regularly supporting the life of the church and inviting them to think about how they could leave a gift in their estate plan. And if they already had that in place, to tell us so that we could have kind of a record, maybe a declaration statement that we could put on file about their intentions to do this. If you have a Legacy Sunday, that would be a great time to do it. If you have an annual birthday of your church that you remember and celebrate, that might be a good time. I started doing it in the weeks soon after Easter, Resurrection Sunday, to think about our hope is in Christ's resurrection. And because of that hope, and that in our end, it will not be the final end for us. It'll be a new beginning. And to think about how they can leave a gift for those who will come after them in the life of the church. Putting a general ask to the congregation through a letter. Number 8 is maybe another step that needs to be in here, and this is probably the one that's a little more challenging. I put here pastor make personal family visits. I think it could be others. It could be a staff member of the congregation. It could be endowment committee or others from the congregation who have some relationship with church members and to engage them and to talk about how they might consider giving a gift to make a difference in the life of the church. If we're going to overcome that need where people say, no one ever asked me, we're going to have to make a plan to how to do that. There's probably a couple different things that we might consider is who's the right person to make the ask, and does that person have comfort? Who's the right people in the room to engage a family member? I think it often comes with other pieces. So what happened for me at my last church is I would try to ask one family, engage one family per month. Now, there were certain months that were busy with Lent or Easter or other things that I didn't do it. So I probably got to maybe 8 or 9 families per year. And I mainly would bring the flyer that we had created and talk to them. And they knew that I was going to be talking and thanking them for their faithful giving to the church. So mainly I said thank you. And that's not something that a lot of our congregations hear in a personal way, where we sat down at the table, we had coffee, and I said, thank you. Thank you for your faithful giving. We couldn't do the ministries that we do without your generosity. We so appreciate the ways that you make a difference with your resources. Thank you so much. We talk about vision. These are the dreams and visions that we have for the future, for how we're going to continue our ministry, how we're going to make disciples of Jesus Christ, how we're going to connect with younger families, whatever the pieces are of the vision. I would talk about vision. They're giving money not so that the church just has a larger endowment. They're giving money so that a portion of it can go to make a difference in people's lives in our community. And so would talk about that vision, and then I would simply invite them to remember the church and their estate plan. It could be simply as, would you please prayerfully consider remembering the church in your estate plan? Maybe it's a tithe. What would that look like? Or a child's worth, as I put here. Maybe it is, you ask a different question. Maybe the question is, have you remembered the church in your estate plan? We're so grateful for your generosity. Have you remembered the congregation as part of the ways you'll leave a legacy with your resources? And if the answer is no, then maybe you invite them to consider remembering the church and their estate plan. And if you have the ability to talk about the different buckets of resources that can make a lasting difference in the church and how we'll use it, you can talk about that. Maybe they say, yes, I've done that. And then you can say, thank you. And you can put notes into some kind of record so the church has awareness of where the money will come from and what their intentions are for those dollars. If you do that, my encouragement is to have it be as most broad as possible. That's the best resource to receive is unrestricted gifts that can allow the church to use it for any kinds of ministries. This has been part of our issue here lately is we've had a pandemic, and what the church needed pre-pandemic was different than what we needed for the previous 2 years. And frankly, we don't know what the church is going to need in the next 20 years or 40 years. And so having some adaptability in those gifts can make a lasting difference. When I started doing this, what I did is I mainly started with families that were either that I knew were tithing of their regular giving, or they were giving larger amounts, either for a capital campaign or for the operating budget. I was starting with those who were faithfully supporting the life of the church first. Now, there are times when a church doesn't know that an estate gift is coming. I mean, I hear that frequently of a church who received a gift and go, oh, I didn't know they were going to remember us in their estate plan, or I didn't know that they had resources they wanted to give. Well, there are lots of unknowns about that, and so there's a need to be broad in it, as well as a need to be more relationally and engaging with individuals. Oftentimes, I would put in the annual pledge document. It would be kind of a pledge card or commitment of giving card, that if they would like to, if they had remembered the church in their estate plan, or they had a planned gift in place, to let us know, or if they would like to visit about that, to let us know. And a lot of those times prompted us an opportunity to go and make a personal relationship and a personal engagement. We're trying to work on some kind of steps that might be helpful for families or for church leaders if they want to make personal engagements, some kind of ideas and kind of guidelines for making an ask. And so if that is something of interest for you, if you'll let us know, I would be grateful. One of the other things that I started doing was to make sure we were transparent. So as part of charge conference every year, you normally have to fill out what is called form number 2, care of members and assets. And what I started including for our church was also information about estate gifts, planned gifts, the endowment program. And I did it in a way that the audience would know full transparency, but that their attention would be focused on the places where they could choose to give. So if there was a Dustin Petz fund in there, a named fund for something very specific that the church had received in its past, I would keep that in there, but it would be towards the bottom, as opposed to the main buckets that we would be welcoming new gifts into from congregation members. But how much is in there? Where is it invested and how is it invested? How much came in new this year? What restrictions are on the gifts, if there are any? How did we use the money to make a difference in the life of the church? Who are all the givers who made this pool of resources possible? I found it was helpful to be able to tell that story as part of the annual charge conference. Related, when we would send out our annual giving statements, most churches send out an annual giving statement. And it says, Dustin and Shelley gave, this amount each of these different months for a total amount of this. Maybe has a component on there about no services were rendered for these gifts. It's a charitable gift receipt, the normal kind of things. I would have a separate cover letter, and as the pastor would say, thank you so much for your generosity. These are the ways that we made a difference in our community and our ministry. This is the number of new members. This is the number of people that we averaged in worship attendance. This is how we did our work. I was tying money to impact, and included in that would be kind of summary statements of, we received $275,000 of new gifts this year into our endowment program. And the endowment as a whole made distributions for these different causes this year. Whatever it is, be able to tell those stories as part of that annual giving statements that come out, January 25th or whatever it was, doing a review on the previous year. I think as a whole, there's simply a need to ask and thank people and tell. We do this on an individual relationship, but we also do this as a whole for the congregation. And it's this slow and steady repeating these processes and be able to grow the endowment so that it has this resource that we can make a lasting difference. I once had a person who gave a presentation about endowments, and their recommendation was to have as your really first goal to be 5 times your annual budget as the size of your endowment. I think that's a good goal. And I think that's a place where we can start from. Now, some of our congregations have maybe already gotten to that place. And as long as we've got good ministries that are happening, I think the need is to think about what are the next steps. So if a family came and gave us additional monies, what would we do with additional dollars to make a difference in ministry, to help us do the things that we're not able to do right now with that resource? The vision is not that the churches become trust fund churches where we don't have any need for annual gifts. We're living off of legacy gifts, but it's about how we can do ministry. I remember reading a book by Mark Batterson. He's a pastor from a non-denominational church in Washington, D.C., and he tells a story about a family that came and gave a very sizable gift to that church. They did it while they were living, not in an estate plan, but it was a very large gift. I don't remember the amount, maybe $3 million, something like that. But what I want you to hear is this family gave this gift, and the part of the reason that Mark tells the story that this family gave the gift was that this church had vision beyond their resources. They had vision beyond their resources. I think sometimes our congregations don't receive some of the gifts that we might receive from our congregation members is because we don't have big enough vision. If they were to give their gift, we wouldn't know what to do with it. We wouldn't have a plan for it. We wouldn't be able to put it into ministry in a good way. And so I think having that piece in place of what would it look like for us to receive another $1 million or whatever the amount is, because I think people have the capacity to give, and if we have vision, I think those gifts will come. We'll have to do these other pieces that we're talking about, but they want to give. They want to give to capital projects. They want to give to see ministries and lives changed, and I think they would be honored to do so. These next steps are ones that some churches might consider using, maybe others not so. Some of our churches have what is called a legacy society, or you might use a different term to describe it, but it's a recognition of a group of people who have intentionally made a commitment to make a lasting difference with a legacy gift. And so some mechanism where you celebrate them, you give thanks for them. I don't know as you build a donor wall, but that's something that some churches do. I'm not saying that's something you ought to do, but some mechanism to be able to say thank you and to steward that relationship. So a lot of this is someone says, yes, I'm going to give a tithe of my estate. And how do we steward that relationship with that family and the gift that they're giving, possibly through a legacy society? Possibly it's through a kind of an annual foundation Sunday, where you intentionally talk about endowments. Some of the churches in our state have a program and process in place where they invite congregants to give a dollar amount in relativity to the years that the church has been around. So if the church has been around 100 years, you might invite each congregation member to give $100 to be part of this kind of membership or a foundation group, really to just honor the congregation. So the church that I attend does this. And so every year we find out whatever the number is, and individuals can give a cash gift that year for this. I think that's great. And my encouragement is to, you can consider this, but don't let that overshadow the estate gift where they give a tithe. So this might be a mechanism to receive smaller dollars on a regular basis and to say thank you and to follow up with these family members to invite them to remember the church and their estate plan. If I give $120 this year and $121 next year and $122 the year after, it will build over time, and I and other congregant members. But for the most part, it won't be the same as if I gave a tithe of my estate. So it might be that you do both and you engage them and you use this a mechanism to say, hey, thank you so much for your generous gift to the foundation. We're so grateful for your 100 and 101 and 102 gifts. Would you be interested to remember the church with a percentage of your estate that will make an even further lasting impact in the life of the church? I had one congregation talk about wanting to do a kind of we're good at stewardship campaigns, or an annual giving campaign. We're pretty good about capital campaigns. We need to raise, $900,000 for this new renovation that's needed in our church, whatever it is. And we have projects where we receive pledges and receive gifts. Maybe we have a day where we celebrate, Miracle Sunday, where we bring as much as we can for one day, and we celebrate that gift on a part of our campaign. You might consider a legacy giving campaign. One of the churches is thinking about, they're celebrating a certain milestone, and they're thinking about how can we get that number of families to consider leaving an estate gift of some fashion. The gift hasn't come in, but they have made a pledge. Maybe not the dollar amount. Maybe you don't chase how much we're trying to raise. We're just chasing or seeking to engage and make asks for people to give, and we have a certain number, or maybe we're looking to have 25 families remember in their estate plan our congregation. And so we're on an engagement process to come to that number to remember and celebrate. So those are some of the big pictures of things that I think are helpful for our congregations. And so I want to kind of, I guess, if you will, close with some of the things that we do and the ways that we could be helpful for you and for the churches or agencies across the state. So one of which is we help churches update their endowment policies and look at charters or bylaws, gift acceptance policies, those kinds of things, that framework that's necessary for having a good endowment program. If you have investments with us, we can help engage with you. We have some churches that don't have their funds invested with us, and we've come into kind of a contracted relationship so that we can offer this service for a church to help them. I think having those policies in place, having the promotional tools in place, those are good steps, and then follow it with preaching and teaching and kind of working this program over time. Another thing that we do to provide support for services for churches is we can help you create a trifold. We have some templates that we've built, the kind of updated promotional ones, and we can put your information into this one, or we can help you kind of come up with that and create that, and provide a source to get the printing done for you. There'll be a fee for that to be able to make that happen, but we can provide that service and use some of the ones that we have built already. Some of our churches already have these and don't need outside support for that. This last Sunday, I preached at a church. I preached at the services about estate planning and legacy giving, and then Tyler and I did presentations about generosity, helping people think about their resources while they're living, as well as their estate planning process. And so we're part of a broader ask and training. And I think when people go, oh, that makes sense, now I understand how I can do this, then they can take the next steps with their attorney, or if they have need for engaging an accountant to think through what's the best way for them to make a difference in now or in their estate plan. But that's ministries that we do. There are 600 Methodist churches in Kansas, and there's not that many weekends in a year. And so if you're interested in this, we may figure out how to do this. Maybe it'll be a year from now if we don't find the right time, but these are services that we provide. Number 4 is we're continuing to grow our ability to help faithful Kansas Methodists get their estate plans in place. And so we're working to build a process where we can engage you and help you build a initial intake form and gather information, think through some of the things initially of what would be helpful, and then help you find an attorney to put that plan in place. We do have a specialist who works with us if that is needed. But we're trying to build a network of attorneys across the state who can be great resources. And we collaboratively with you and with your church can help your congregation members put plans in place so that they can care for their estate well and give generously to support the life of the church and other causes that they care about. If families want to use us to be the caretaker of estate gifts, we can do that as well to support your church or other camp or university or other 501c3 ministries or other 501c3s beyond the church that you care about. And then lastly, Tyler Curtis on our staff works to help engage with family members to help put in place those gifts. I know we were talking at a meeting and did a presentation with some pastors here recently. And the question was, who are those family members, maybe 3 or 5, who are those family members that if you don't know, if you haven't engaged them, what would it look like for you to put something in place to engage them about remembering the church and their estate plan? I remember some of the family members at the churches that I've served that loved the church, faithfully participated in the church, were generous to the congregation, loved the congregation, and I did their funeral service and celebrated their life and their witness and their ministry. And some of them gave gifts in their estate plan. Many of them did not. And I regret that I hadn't had the opportunity to invite them and to encourage them to remember the church and their estate plan. Sometimes we have people who don't feel comfortable, and that's where we can come alongside of you. And Tyler can be a great resource to help engage congregation members to think about how they can leave a lasting legacy with their resources, to be an ongoing support for the church, to help it do the things that it can't do yet. We have the resources in our congregations, we just don't have them. People haven't given them, and we haven't asked for them to where we can use them to make a lasting difference. But that's something that we do as part of our ministry serving our churches. So that's the presentation I want to give. I appreciate our time together and just thank you for the work and ministry you do in your local context to help grow and strengthen ministries in the future. So let me offer a prayer and then we'll close. Gracious God, pour out your Spirit upon us. Help us to be faithful stewards. You're the owner. We're the stewards of the resources you've entrusted to us. Help us to be wise and generous. Help us to also be diligent, to plan for steps before us, to put in place stages so that we can receive gifts to further the work and ministry of the church for your glory. It is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you all so much for being here. I pray God's blessing upon you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.